Sarah Gentry, you got it? I've been trying to obey all the laws. Yeah, it's good. I was happy to see him. We were in leadership Cullman together, and I was so excited that he became the sheriff. And I'm excited to have a good relationship with him, and obviously to have a sheriff on every school campus is huge. It's huge, and greatly appreciate what he's doing. There's nothing more important than safety, bar none. At the end of the day, if you can go home and we can send your child home safe, that's all that matters, really. I mean, because the other, just like calling off school, I mean, you can criticize all you want until that first bus slides off the road, and then you know what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So we always err on the side of caution. But any concerns tonight, or anything I can address personally? I'm really not a bad guy, no matter what you put on Facebook. Like I said, my biggest thing is that if you've got an issue with something I'm doing, please come to the source. Whether you camp out like Trent did today until I could see him, and lock yourself down in the lobby and refuse to leave until I talk to you, whatever it takes. I mean, unfortunately, I do get a lot of emails, but I do answer them, but come to the source. Don't believe what you read, okay? The National Enquirer has been in business for 86 years. I understand that, because people like drama. But come to the source. Yes, sir?
I just had a question about the investigation, because I read it on AO.com.
Sure.
That they had interviewed him.
Sure, he did.
It's not true?
It's not true. Ziegler does not have, Alan Ziegler, which is interesting. There's two attorneys in the state named Alan Ziegler. Ziegler, the state auditor, is the brother of one of those attorneys. The other Alan Ziegler is actually the attorney that we used to do this real estate. We used 3 attorneys to do this real estate transaction, just to make sure that things went the way that they were supposed to go. And no, there's zero truth to the investigation.
Someone posted it on his back.
No, well, Mr. Ziegler, the state auditor, actually posted it on his Facebook page that he was concerned, said that what we were doing was illegal, and that he was going to investigate it. The very next day, he posted that the investigation, what did it say? The investigation is in preliminary stages. Basically, it has started, and that he was investigating it. Now, by all means, if he just means that he's going to look into it and whatever, that's one thing. But as a state auditor, to put that on Facebook without ever contacting Cullman County Schools, I mean, I've never heard from the man.
So there could be an investigation.
Well, he may be looking into it, but he does not speak for the state.
Right.
He is an individual, maybe curious, just like Mr. and Mrs. Smith, who live out in Harmony, are looking into it to see what we're doing. But there is no state investigation involved in this piece of property purchase, because everything was done in a legal manner. As a matter of fact, we have gotten every indication that everything has been approved at the state level for the funds, the interest, small interest loan that we took to pay back the general fund. The other issue that's come up that I want to dispel is the earmark funds. The earmark funds come from, the state gave us, and I don't remember the dollar that we got from like maintenance and keeping up with we got so much money from the state when we were given the Section 16 land. Okay. We had, what was the amount of earmark? This is my CSFO, Mr. Robertson. I don't know if you're aware of that. Ed Robertson is our Chief Financial Officer and handles, obviously all the finances. But Section 16 money versus general fund money. Okay, so about $300,000 we had in earmark funds. That funds can only be spent, and you'll learn in any kind of government agency, there are certain funds that can only be used for certain things. And you can't go outside of that or you're in trouble. Okay, about $300,000 of that money was generated for the Section 16 land. It could only be spent on developing the Section 16 land. That's it. It's the only way that you can use that money. And so part of the funds that we use to purchase this property will be that, because we've cut down almost 100 acres, 90 acres of trees on our Section 16 property that is located in Sugar Ridge. That generated $276,000. That money is then goes into a separate account that it can only be spent on Section 16 money. So the earmark comments, that's where those comments are coming from. You can't spend that money on anything else but Section 16 money. So that money will deter the cost of the purchase, if you will, basically.
So if you're saying that Webster Street, then you have to spend money for Section 16, if the property gets developed.
Then it's a
So
whole,
if it's a casino or whatever.
sure.
Then does that money have to be used still for Section 16?
No, and this is where it gets a little tricky. This all goes back to the paperwork that was originally drawn up between the state of Alabama and Cullman County School Board. When all of the Section 16 lands, we have two 100-acre tracts, one's in Joppa, one's in Trigger Ridge, and then we have just under 500 acres on Smith Lake, almost 7 miles of lakefront. Very, very nice, hopefully, for Cullman County Schools' future. All of that property was given to Cullman County Schools because it was ours. But it had been lost through time and was being managed by the state. But ultimately, the state gave all Section 16 properties to the school boards way back in the 1800s. But through the work of many people, hard work, Dr. Franny, I know, was a part of that team. Billy Cullman obviously took a couple years. All your state legislatures fought like crazy to get this property for the future of Cullman County schools. So they agreed with the governor, but here's the catch. One of the biggest reasons why we got it is because we agreed that if we sold it or developed it or leased it or whatever, that money, and you probably read this in the paper, that 90% of that money has to go into a trust. And then basically we get, I think it's like 83%, and the city system gets 17% because technically they're in Cullman County. They get roughly 17% of the interest every year in one check. And then we can take that interest and use it on whatever we need to. It basically can be general fund money. So I can use it on capital improvements, I can finally build you a gym, I can find, whatever needs to happen. Those funds can finally be used for that type of thing. So obviously the potential for this property is enormous because as I come in and look at the challenges that you face, number one, I've already had to condemn a school right before school started, which was not a lot of fun. And still isn't a lot of fun because we still are, looking at a very tough decision about closing the school, keeping the school open, taking $2 million to put into that school. And the biggest problem I have is I know that if I sent that same team of engineers around to every school, that I probably would end up with even more damage than I even know I have. And that's scary to me. So we haven't been able to have the funds because of the recession and many things to put the money into the schools. And so you have, number one, you can't afford 29 schools the way you currently sit. And you certainly can't afford to fix up 29 schools with the financial, where you're at. We finished the year roughly around $300,000 in the hole. That money had to come out of our savings account because we're not allowed to finish in the red. So again, we've got financial issues. Thank you for everybody who voted for the half-cent sales tax because that money is really one of the only reasons we've been able to do anything. But that money is, again, earmarked because a promise was made that if you vote yes, we will use that money for X, Y, and Z, which is pretty much all technology. And I can show you in every single school where that's being used. We have very transparent, clear documentation on how that money is being used. There's a portion of that money that comes directly back to each and every school in the system, just as promised, and things like that. But I can't fix up buildings. I can't build cafeterias. I can't do anything with that funds other than that. So in the area of technology, we'll look great. We're going to have some good advances in technology in the upcoming couple of years. But as far as capital improvements, we're hurting. We're hurting. So we're really down to two options. To make it very simple, you have two options. We either A, change the way that we fund schools, okay, which is just a nice way of saying raising taxes. Okay, now I've never been in a meeting where anybody smiled when I said that. Okay, and the last thing that I would like to do in an area where you register at around 71% poverty is hit the pocketbooks of people that are working really hard to put food on their tables to make sure that their kids have dinner. Okay, that's about the last thing that I want to do is raise taxes. And that's absolutely not where I'm headed. And I have no plan for that initiative at this point. Okay? The only other way that we can get around some of the issues that we have is become more efficient. And so I'm doing everything that I possibly can to become as efficient as possible. We're looking at the way that we process payroll. We changed the way that we do that. We changed the way that we're looking at, can we look at purchasing software so that we don't have to have as many people in the central office? Can we, right down to the letter, we were looking at every nook and cranny. I brought in an independent company that does nothing but look at how to become more efficient. They've looked at all of my non-instructional areas. They found about $600,000, of things that we could do, and that was just with an initial review of ways that we can do things differently and save $600,000. So over the course of the next 6 months, we'll be taking those initiatives. So now I've got $600,000 more I can put in my general fund. So we're going to do everything that I can so that if it ever came down the road that I had to ask for anything involving funding, you're going to see very clearly that I'm as squeaky, lean, and as efficient as I possibly can be, and I don't have any choice but to come to the community and say, okay, look, this is where we're at. This is what I need. This is what I'm going to use it for. This is what we got to have. You point out ways to me, or you point out something that I'm doing wrong, and I'll be happy to change it. But we're not there yet. There's still a lot of different things that I need to fix. And you can't point a finger at anybody. Like I said, how it got that way is irrelevant. And that's been brought up several times. Well, how do we get this way? It doesn't matter how we got this way. What matters, I'm not going to waste any time on that. What matters is that we fix it from this point forward. And that'll be very transparent. You will see those changes. You will see those changes as early in the next couple of weeks, I can promise you, because some of them are dramatic. Some of them are going to make people mad.
They want some land purchase to sell of the property.
Sure.
That property may be worth the money. But is this something that y'all can sit on for 10 or 15 years while we got, like you said, schools getting condemned?
Right.
Football stadiums getting condemned, they're having to do temporary work for them.
Right.
I mean, when are we going to see this? If y'all have done nothing wrong.
Right.
When are we going to see the sale of that land?
Right. Great
How
question.
much more money are you going to put into the dilapidated lake house?
Right. I can't put any money into the house, actually. That is illegal. If I put any money into the house, that would be illegal. Now, into the lands is different, but into the house is different. I cannot put any funds into that house. So that I wish the house, quite honestly, someone would actually bulldoze that thing, but sure.
I know several people that built multi-million-dollar lake houses standing on the property,
Sure.
and they lost their tail.
Absolutely.
They took $500,000 to $1 million back.
Yeah.
That cannot happen.
Right. Well, like I said, at this point, when you look at the fact that you have 500 acres, roughly, 473, I think is the exact number, whatever. It's just slightly less than 500 acres, slightly less than 7 miles of lakefront on Smith Lake. And at this point, your investment is $1.2 million that you have into that property. The rest of it literally was given to you, or was given back to you, because it was rightfully yours to begin with. That's the only investment that you have in it. To address your question, how long are we going to sit on it? Number one, this was brought to my attention back in July, which I was on the job for about 2 weeks, when someone who brought this issue to me and said, look, you've got a problem. You've got this great thing that can really change the future of Cullman County Schools, but you don't have access rights, you don't have easement rights, you've got a lot of issues with this property that you're going to have to clean up. And and I want to let you know this because this property is for sale, and if someone else buys this property, you're going to be in trouble because they're going to hold on to it and sell it to you later when it's worth $5 million or whatever. Because if you look at the property, the one thing that was really good about this article is it showed the property. If you look at it, at the very bottom is the peninsula, and you can see, and then there's a nice purple road that goes all the way through our property up to where this other green square is, which is an acre. That's where the driveway is, that's where the gates are, and not fancy gates, they're just gates that open up. It allow you to enter this piece of property. So if you're going to go in, initial estimates, I've heard anything from $30 to $50 million is what this property is worth. There is no official audit that's been done, so I'm not going to say that I know how much it's worth. But, and that's why in my quote it says multi-millions, but you know, the people that have looked at it, investors that have looked at it, said that that's probably where it would sell for. It's somewhere in that 30, you know, to $50 million range. Lake prices were at the highest in '06. And, you know, are we going to be able to have the grace to wait till then? Probably not. You know, I mean, it's going to be about, we can't even market this property until this purchase is finalized. You know.
Easement through that property before?
Well, we had a very small little, a very small entrance, not an entrance that you could expand on or that you could even get a truck into. You know, so let's say that you're. Pretty much, yeah, pretty much about the width of the driveway, and that was it. Is, you know, because in the state of Alabama, it says that you cannot be landlocked, and that's absolutely true. Which is another big reason when you look at this property and see where it's at, and that we have a road going all the way through it. But the person that owns this piece of property here on the bottom owned everything else as well. So they own this. They own the entrance, they own the access right, they own all the easements, and they own that road that goes right through the middle of our property. They own all of it. And so by purchasing the property, you cleared up all of those issues in one sweep. So now, you know, like I said, you have somebody like, let's say that Toyota comes in and they want to build a corporate retreat on Smith Lake or whatever. I mean, the automakers in this area are incredible. Or Mercedes-Benz wants to do something with it, build a training center. You know, with the 222 interchange being not that far from this property, really. You know, there's all different kinds of things that could happen. So they come in, okay, they're not going to pay $30 million for a piece of property that they can't bring a truck onto, or that they have to allow somebody else to drive down to through their middle of their property. So as far as the investment potential of it, we had to clean up what we were selling. And now that that has been cleaned up and we own it, you know, the marketing part of this can take place. But, you know, you've had it for 2 years and nothing has been done up to this point, other than try to manage it and get it back to where it needed to be. Which is, I mean, it's an enormous windfall. I mean, really, I mean, it's incredible that you have it. There's no other school system in America, I think, at this point, that has had a windfall like this. I mean, it's incredible that you've had this opportunity. It's pretty cool. But it's going to take time. You know, I mean, how long? I hope not long. I mean, I would love to see, you know, some of the changes that we need, you know. Now, I'm not going to be the guy after it takes 2 years to get the property. I'm not going to let it go for $3 million because I can take that $3 million and solve some of my problems. I mean, I think we have to be responsible and know what it's worth. So the audits will be done, not the audits, but the appraisals will be done so that I have a really good understanding of what it would be worth if it was at '06 prices, what is it worth now, what is the potential. You know, if it was a commercial piece of property, if it was a residential, if we developed it, what is it worth? And have all of that drawn up. All of that will be very public, you'll see that, and we'll have a good idea so that when someone comes in and says, hey, you know, we'll give you $5 million for it, and we'll say, keep trucking, it's not time. You know, lake prices obviously are not back, but they are on the rise. There is definitely, they're headed in the right direction again. But and with the industry that we have coming in, with the expansion of Rahal and some of these other industries that you have, with the 222 interchange and what that could bring, and now that we've got the alcohol thing solved again, and you know all of the things that are going right for Cullman County right now, there is a ton of potential for someone to come in and want this property and to jump on it, and they may get it at a better price than what they would have paid for it in '06, and we'll have to make that judgment decision, and that won't be just my decision. You know, it's it's an extremely rare day that I ever make a decision on my own about anything. You know, I mean, I'm a servant leader. I serve first and foremost the children. Then I serve the teachers and the principals of this county and the community of this county. So those decisions are weighed out heavily by a team of people. So when we do get an offer that may be something that we can consider, then you can be public with it. But as far as the purchasing of it and going after it, some of it wasn't as public as I know the general public would have liked, and I understand that. But at the same time, there was a risk of making it too public as well. Yes, ma'am.
Like somewhere I read that we didn't have that property appraised.
We had it not as an official appraisal. We did not spend the money. Well, you didn't need it. You didn't need it. I mean, technically, the investment people that we worked with, the companies that we worked with, where you can easily show that it's worth around that $1.8 million range as far as the number of lots that you can create on it versus the amount of lakefront that's there. Lakefront property on Smith Lake sells for approximately somewhere between $900 and $1,250 is what it's, and then
And
you,
I understand all that.
right, so the price was generated in that way as far,
Purchase something without having to price it.
because I didn't want to spend another 10 grand on it when I knew what it was worth, and it wasn't worth spending $10,000 on something that I already knew.
Well, I can tell you, I can put a price to any, I'm gonna tell you, that's $10,000. I'm not doing bank.
Right, absolutely.
So you're going on with the investor saying, okay, this property should be worth this, and you say, well, you know what it's worth. That's a big deal.
Right.
That's about as far away from here as you can get. You don't know the local economy, you've only been here for 9 years.
Sure.
You've been here from this person's land. I don't think there was a lot of information record through it.
Right.
So it might not be worth it. It might not be worth what the house is, $100,000. I know the house ain't worth that.
No, the house is not worth that. Yeah, like I said, the house isn't even the issue.
It was way,
I think what the tax office has estimated as well.
tax, out with versus, the tax assessments are always out of that.
Sure.
Because the higher they appraise something, the more taxes they collect on it. So I don't get, nobody should go off of that.
That's
So,
what we think.
yeah, and I understand that they say it is a $3 million Look.
Well, I can tell you that we started the bidding well, no, we started the bid, what was our initial bid, 800,000? 800,000. And they owed more than that on the property, because they paid 1.3, I think, for the property or something like that. Yeah, they still had 900 or so left on it. Here's the issue, is basically, this was really the decision, is if we didn't do it, how would the residents of Cullman County feel about just allowing that Section 16 land, that enormous gift that you got, that you worked 2 years to get, if you just would have didn't mind just kind of letting that sit and then doing nothing with it. And that was really, the statement that I made in my press release was, it's kind of like somebody giving you a Ferrari and saying, well, here's a $500,000 Ferrari, you can sell it, you can drive it, you can do whatever you want with it, but I don't have the key. And it's going to cost you $1,000 to make that key, and you're saying, well, I'm not going to spend $1,000 on that key. It's the same situation. The property that you did own has enormous financial potential. However, it's dramatically decreased if you don't own this piece of property. And that really, whether, if we overpaid for it or if we underpaid for it or any of that is really irrelevant, because again, like we said, what you're looking at is 500 acres, 7 miles of lakefront for $1.2 million. I can promise you, I can find somebody that would give me 10 times that amount for it as it sits. But I'm not willing to accept that at this point because, like I said, it's worth a lot more than that. And we're going to get the most bang for our buck that we possibly can out of this if we're truly going to change the financial future and outcome for Cullman County kids. Then we've got to at least be responsible enough to do with what we can with it to get as much as we can. And we'll have to make that decision as a team. Yes, sir.
When you make our board and you purchase that land without a grant,
Say it again.
I purchased that land without a grant.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, there have been appraisals done on it in the past. We had old appraisals. We didn't get a current, up-to-date appraisal. Because like I said, it was $10,000 to get a current one. We were able to piece together what we had. And like I said, in my opinion, and in the opinion of several real estate professionals, there was no option. You either purchased the property or you let the 413 acres that you had there, 20-some acres, sit and rot. Because you don't have access to it, you don't have the property rights that you need to it to do what you need to do. You're not going to develop it, and you're certainly not going to sell it. So you would have owned a big chunk of property, but you would have never seen any kind of benefit from it. And it would have been a real shame to have that type of a gift given to you and then never use it. Never see the capital that could have came off of that. Yes, ma'am?
Who gave how did the easement go through the property in the first place?
That was given directly by the governor of Alabama. And it's because of state law that basically says that you cannot be landlocked, you know, and so that becomes a big issue. So if you would have had somebody else buy that property that we purchased, that 10 acres there on the end, they could do whatever they want with it. Because number one, it's in the county. You have very, very little building codes here that restrict you from building whatever you darn well please. So you run a real risk of somebody buying that property right next to school board property and literally decreasing your property value because of what they do with that 10 acres. So again, another huge risk. But the governor himself assigned that right of way to that road as far as them being able to drive right through our property. Well, Dr. Franny was a part of getting the, you know, actually getting the land.
And it was.
It was Bentley.
Right away by the governor.
Well, it was 2 years ago. Who was governor 2 years ago? Bentley was governor 2 years ago. So it was Bentley.
Oh, the right of way was just been 2 years? To the property?
Oh, how long has it been?
It's been longer. I'm gonna go back and look at it. I didn't bring mine.
No, you're right. It's been longer. I'm thinking of 2 years ago. That's my error.
The right of way is through the school's property,
It is
and the
through-
property that they purchased is on the peninsula, right?
Correct.
Okay.
That's attached to our property.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
In the meantime, that we have this property and this investment, that in 10 years, we may see something out of it. The people who are moving, the families that are moving to our areas in Cullman, they're looking at our schools. I can't really say there's a school where I would drive in their parking lot and be impressed.
Right. I agree.
For 10 years, we've got the gymnasium up there, but it's not usable. If you go in there and sit in there on a meeting day, you will understand that.
Sure.
Um,
No,
for 10 years,
I agree.
that's not gonna make us any money.
Mhm.
And
No, so there's gotta be-
we're not gonna move into our communities because of the school.
Sure.
So
Absolutely.
what's the answer to that?
The answer to that is, and that's why I said that even if this property sale, knowing that you have this gold mine, whether it hits in 2 years, 10 years, you know, whatever that is, whether I'm here or not, doesn't, you know, I don't know when that's going to hit. My crystal ball doesn't work well. But I can say that that's why, irregardless of having that, even if I sold it for $40 million next week, I'm still going to make sure that we work on the efficiency of the system, because we can't afford to. I've got principals telling me that they can't wax their floor every year because they can't afford the wax. Okay, how do you know when you're financially stretched too far, when you can't take care of what you have? Okay, Craig and Angela Ross, me and my wife can afford one home. You know, if I could have afforded to, I would have went ahead and kept my one down in Daphne because I loved it and I put 3 years of labor into it remodeling. I would have loved to have that house. Could have went down there twice a year, would have been a wonderful thing. But I can't afford to take care of that house in Daphne and take care of my house in Vineland. And so I sold the house in Daphne. It's the same thing here. You have 29 schools. We have 29 schools that we are trying to maintain, and we do not have the money to maintain them. So again, just like a family budget, I mean, when you know that you are stretched too far, when you can't afford to do what you need to do, when you can't do the preventative maintenance, you know, when you got to close the school instead of fixing the school, when you got to close the stadium instead of fixing the stadium, then you are financially stretched beyond your limits. And so my job, and to address your issues, because I had the same issue. You know, I drove my daughter up to Vinemont, you know, met with Dr. Payne, who was the principal at the time, handed him my daughter's transcript and said, okay, here's my daughter's transcript. She just came from Daphne High School. She was in the IB program. And he looked at me, shook his head, and said, I'm sorry, we don't have any classes that your daughter can go to. You know what I mean? So this is personal to me too. So I brought my daughter up here to finish high school as a junior, and I had to put her on a, you know, we have fast track, thank God, and it's worked out well. But that was a risk for me, because now my daughter at age 17, 16 at the time, is on a campus with college students. Makes me a little nervous as a dad, you know. So, you know, we've got to build the curriculum. We've got to get, you know, things in place that give our students more opportunity. We've got to have buildings where it screams, you know, that we value education. We value, when they walk in there, they know that they're going to do their best, because obviously we value education because of the way that those buildings look. I think aesthetics are extremely important, and I couldn't agree with you more. It's embarrassing to me as the superintendent to have, and I've got a lot of visitors coming because we're getting ready to go through accreditation. They're coming from another state to come look at our schools. They're going to walk through our halls and judge me as the superintendent on what kind of condition we're in.
How are you justifying the process of the land and your?
Because the only other option, I mean, you know, if we didn't make the investment, one of the biggest chances that